Well, good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome to our fourth, and I can't believe actually final, Education Forum meeting of 2021. For those of you that have not had the chance to meet before, I'm Linda O'Neill, the Education Lead at Celsius, and it's lovely to see so many of our regular forum members here, but it's also really nice to be able to welcome some new members. If this is your first forum meeting, we really hope that you enjoy it, and looking forward to getting the chance to meet with you, hopefully face to face in the not too distant future. But I acknowledge that, like most places, we've been saying that throughout the year, but really hoping that next year we will get the opportunity to come together as a big group again. I'm really delighted this morning to be able to welcome along Jacqueline Cassidy, who's the Director for Scotland of Place to Be. And Jacqueline's going to be telling us about the work that Place to Be are doing in schools and helping us all think about the role of education in supporting the mental health and wellbeing of our children and young people and of our workforce. Jacqueline, I just ask you to say a quick hello to everybody that's in the room.
Hello, I'm really delighted to be here. Thank you very much, Linda. I'm looking forward to meeting you all virtually.
Thank you, Jacqueline, and really looking forward to Jacqueline's input this morning. I know it's a particular priority for many of us in the room. Before we move into today's theme, I thought it would be helpful just to quickly run through the agenda and to cover off some housekeeping. So we're going to kick off with Jacqueline's input, and then there'll be an opportunity for a quick question and answer session after that. We'll then go into breakout rooms to think about some of the questions that Jacqueline's posed for us, and we'll come back together to share some of the themes from our discussions and aim to finish up about 11 o'clock. You'll see at the top that there's a wee banner that's saying that we're recording this session. We'll be recording the main session, but not the breakout rooms. The platform does allow us to use our videos, and you can turn this on in the banner at the top, but we just ask people to keep their microphone off during the main session, but please put it back on in the breakout room so that everybody can join in the discussion, and we'll give you a wee prompt for that as well. The chat function is open, and we'd encourage people to put questions and reflections in the chat as we go along. We will make all the materials available from today available on our website afterwards as well. So if there's any parts that you need to duck in and out for, you will be able to catch up on there afterwards. Just before we move into the agenda, I thought it would be helpful just to set a wee bit of context about why we've invited Jacqueline and Place to Be along today. It's a topic that's been on the agenda for our forum members for a very long time, and I think has only grown in prominence and importance throughout the pandemic. We know that our overall wellbeing is intrinsically linked with our mental health, and just like physical health, it's something that we all have, and I'd suggest actually something that we've all become more aware of for ourselves and others over the course of the pandemic. Unlike physical health, though, which I think has been talked about more and more openly throughout history, the discussion and narrative around mental health is taking a bit longer to become a subject that's more understood and discussed as openly. And whilst we've all seen significant positive changes in both policy and the wider world about how we perceive and talk about and support mental health, I think we would all agree that there's still a way to go in tackling some of the long-standing stigma that can be associated with this area and the associated supports that we can access when we need help. In some ways, I think the pandemic has been quite helpful in raising this issue, and there's been widespread acknowledgement of how the restrictions have impacted upon people's well-being. But I think the pandemic's also shone a bit of a light on the need for greater support in this area, especially for children and young people. In education, health and wellbeing sits at the heart of the National Improvement Framework, alongside literacy and numeracy, and that acknowledges the importance of health and wellbeing in relation to wider attainment and achievement. We all know that good mental health and wellbeing supports good outcomes, but what we also know is that before the pandemic, education settings were reporting rising mental health concerns for children and young people, and the pandemic has only exacerbated this for a lot of people. We know that there's long waiting times for specialist mental health supports for children and young people, and it's been widely reported on this issue. There has been a commitment from government to reduce these waiting times and to provide additional funding to try and put in place support and make sure that children and young people can get access to good quality support, not just when they need it, but where they need it. We know that all children need this support to be able to thrive, and care experienced children aren't any different from any other children. But what can be different for this group is that their circumstances, which can make them more vulnerable to experiencing poor outcomes in both well-being and being able to access the right support at the right time. We also know that a mentally healthy workforce is absolutely crucial to make sure that the adults around children are able to provide the support that they need when they need it. And care experienced children tell us often, and have done for a really long time, that having a single trusted adult can be one of the most effective ways of supporting them through their life. But we know that these adults are often teachers or other members of the education workforce, and that they need specific understanding, skills, experience and support for their own well-being to be able to fulfil this role well. So good mental well-being sits alongside the many other skills and experiences that education staff need in their kit bag to be able to support children and young people. I think moving into COVID recovery, we know that everyone will have experienced the pandemic differently, but we know that for the majority of people, and especially those that face additional vulnerabilities, that wellbeing support will be absolutely crucial in helping people to start to heal from the experiences that we've had. So it's because of this that we've invited Place to Be along today to help us think together about this area and think about what we can take from the work that they're doing, the learning that we can share with each other, and start to think about how we can embed this in our practice. Whilst I want to reassure people that the Education Forum is, and hopefully has always been, a safe space to discuss in any area, we also acknowledge that the subject of mental health and wellbeing can be challenging and evocative at times. So I just urge people today to keep yourself safe in the conversations, and feel free to step out at any point if you need to, and come back whenever you would like to. So without further ado, I will hand over to Jacqueline now to take us through our input. And if I just remind people to keep your microphone muted during the presentation, but as I said earlier, please feel free to put questions and reflections in the chat as we go along, and we can come back to them during the Q&A. So Jacqueline, I will hand over to you.
Thank you, Linda. And that was a really good summary of why we think the work that we do is so important, in terms of the need for mental health support for children and young people across the piece, but particularly for our care experienced children and young people, in order to be able to give them the resilience and the tools that they need in order to be able to attain, and absolutely well-being as the foundation for attainment. So thank you very much for that introduction. I'm going to now share my screen. Always a nerve-wracking moment. No, that's the wrong one. There you go. Let's see. I could show you an entirely different presentation, but hopefully it says it's preparing my slides. Brilliant. Can I just check that you can see that? Marvelous. Thank you. So I just want to start by sort of telling you a little bit about Place to Be. So maybe just, oh gosh, moved too quickly there. So Place to Be has always been about supporting children and young people's mental health. We've been in Scotland for 20 years. It's a UK organisation. It's been going for nearly 30 years. And the mission is absolutely about the mental health and well-being of children, and supporting them and their families and their school communities. And we want all children to have lifelong coping skills and the resilience. So we'll talk about mental well-being and good mental health, but we can't expect everybody to be happy or well all of the time. So it's what tools can we give you to be able to cope when you have difficult feelings or difficult emotions, and life is challenging. I'm actually not going to tell you about Place to Be. I'm actually going to get this young lady to tell you. She's fabulous, as are most of the young people that you will, in fact, all of the young people that you will see on this video. And I'm going to try and hope. Is that okay? Right.
I started to go to Place to Be because there was a lot of stuff that was really bugging me, and a lot of bad stuff was going on at that point in my life. It's really good because you feel like you can't talk to your mum about it, or teachers, and you think, oh well, maybe I can go to Place to Be and that will help, and it really does.
Place to Be offers a whole school approach which tries to pick up everybody who's involved in the child's well-being, including the child. But it also offers a very targeted approach to individual children with specific needs.
It's been transformational, actually, for the lives of so many of individuals, as well as just the impact it's had on the general school ethos. It's about the quality of the support that they provide, and that's very responsive to the children's needs. So one session will not look the same for the children, and also the children's needs as we identify them are also not one and the same.
I used to get all messed up and all that, and when I was 7. Now I'm 8, I'm getting calmed down because I've talked a lot. I've went to Place to Be about hundreds of times and it's helped me a lot, and now because I've turned 8 I'm feeling braver now. If I didn't have Place to Be, then I don't know who would I talk to, because now I have it, I can just go anytime I want.
At Place to Be, we're really fortunate we have an excellent research and evaluation team, and so they support us in gathering plenty of data, plenty of evidence for what we do, because it's really important that we show that what we're doing is making a difference. So we gather lots of information about who uses the service, why do they use the service, what kind of impact is it having in terms of their well-being. We look at that in a number of ways.
Place to Be is a service that permeates the whole of the school. It's not an add-on, it's not something, there's just this counselling. Sarah and the counsellors within the school work with us through the whole of the PSE programme, through assemblies, through activities, so therefore it's a normality around the service and having the service there. Place to Be is unique, it's valued by students, by staff, by parents. It's the wraparound nature of it that's so important, the fact that it's for everybody, and the impact of it is that young people are happier and able to get on with their lives and be able to access their education. That's what it's all about.
It happened every day. I got bullied and bullied and bullied, but I knew every day I've only got to wait till after break and then I get to go tell somebody, and nobody else gets to know what's going on because it's all confidential, which I really like. It's going to sound really cheesy, I probably wouldn't have liked life, especially going into high school, having all the pressure and not really being so social, and it's made me more confident. If I didn't have Place to Be, I don't know where I would be now.
I think it's quite a relief actually. It's really different. The environment as well, like you can come in here and actually do like art and things like that, which was really nice for me, because I remember when my granddad died, I was kind of struggling because first year I was okay, and then he died when I got into second year and it just started settling in. So then coming here, doing art, talking about my feelings, it made me feel a lot better.
Someone who's like qualified to talk to you and like talk you through certain scenarios and talk you through your emotions and how you feel and how to properly like connect with your emotions.
The need for this kind of service seems to have grown dramatically in the last few years. This has to be partly because now everybody is able to talk about children's mental health in a much more open way. If you'd like to know more about Place to Be, please get in touch with us. We can give you more details about the work that happens in Scotland and in the whole of the UK.
So thank you for listening to that video. I know it's a sort of longish video, but I hope that actually I think what you've heard there is really kind of summing up what we do, and I think it speaks to some of the points that Linda was raising at the beginning, particularly about kind of a one trusted adult and the need for a support that sits around the whole child in across the piece within their kind of school and their community and their family. So just to give you a bit of a sense of kind of what that might look like, these are some, right, okay, so you know, we've got the kind of the work that we do, the kind of targeted interventions. So we've got place to talk sessions, which are essentially any child can come whenever they want. So they put in a wee slip and say, I really want to speak to an adult. I want to speak to the Place to Be clinician, and you know, it's usually at lunchtime or break time. And any child can come whenever they want and need to access that. And in primary school, we often get little groups of children coming where they often want to talk about kind of the dynamic, you know, the friendships amongst themselves. But it's really helpful, I think, to have that option. There's a lengthy assessment process, as you would expect, which it takes on board the views of the child, the views of the school and the family as well. So that's a really kind of thorough process that we have. We have the option of one-to-one counselling, and this can be delivered by a range of people, so that we do have some talking therapists, particularly in secondary school, but we have a lot of art therapists and drama therapists and music therapists who deliver the one-to-one counselling as well and can use those kind of modalities. We have some group work that we have. We also do whole class work and whole school work. So it's a range of approaches. And as you would expect, we've got considerable strengths in kind of safeguarding and additional support need, as well as the work that we have around hidden harms. In the video, you'll have heard also about kind of research and evaluation. So everything we do is evidence-based. So we can demonstrate kind of the impact and how children and young people are moving along, how children and young people are kind of being impacted by kind of what we do with them, how we work with them. We use SDQ's Strengths and Difficulties questionnaire as well as YP Core, and we're just introducing Sterling Wellbeing Model as well, just because I think that's much more of an assets-based approach, and so very happy that we're starting to use that across the whole of the organisation in terms of gathering data. Again, this is something Linda picked up on. So in order to be able to support children and young people, particularly our most vulnerable children and young people, we need to have resilient staff. That's been something that's really been impacted by the pandemic. That's a really big shift. We've been doing it for years, providing training for them, but also providing something called Place to Think, which is a kind of supervision space and an opportunity for staff to kind of really think about the issues and challenges that are coming up in their classroom. We also work with all school staff. So we found that in some of the schools where we work, the janitor's office is where the children will kind of gravitate to. So if they've got an issue or a problem or they just want to hide, they'll go to the janitor's office. That's where there's some nice CCTV cameras to look at. It's warm, it's cozy, there's maybe a cup of tea on the go. So we'll work with the janitor to be able to understand what's happening and how they can respond and how they can support the children and young people who are coming to them in their space. And likewise, it might be someone in the admin office who's the kind of natural person that the children gravitate towards, and again we can provide them with the support that they need to be able to manage that, as well as working with learning support and pupil support assistants as well. So we want to work with all the staff in the school to be able to kind of skill them to be able to manage this kind of the mental well-being of their school. Obviously, children and young people don't just inhabit a world that is school. They're absolutely central to have support for parents and carers and the families who support that child. Particularly important where those children are care experienced within a family setting. We really do need to support those families. So we've got a number of supports and interventions around family support. I've got a slide later on. I'll go into a little bit more detail there about kind of the work that we do there. And then finally, just again, as you would expect, we take an integrated approach. Place to Be is a tier 1, tier 2 service. There are specialist services that we need to refer children and young people onto. For instance, in secondary school, we've got kind of a fairly high instance of eating disorders. We'll be looking to kind of refer those children onto specialist supports. We know that a lot of our children and young people need specialist CAMS support, so we refer on to CAMS, but we'll also be looking at kind of other supports. As part of the Place to Be service, we do have an educational psychologist who can talk to the school about particular cases or the ethos around the school. So we can provide some specialist support there from an educational psychology point of view, but we need to work with other organisations and partner with other organisations in order to be able to support children and young people into the right interventions. So that's just a really quick visual, really, of our sort of targeted and universal interventions. We want to have a whole school approach because we want it to be absorbed into the brickwork of the school. We want a child who has an intervention to walk out of that intervention into a school that feels welcoming, safe, open to their needs around their mental health and their resilience, and can understand them. So it's absolutely a whole school approach with the child at the centre. Jonathan in that video mentioned the kind of incidents, the rising incidence of kind of mental health challenges for children and young people, and that video was made pre-pandemic. As you can probably tell, there are no masks and lots of close contact, but pre-pandemic, 1 in 6 children had a mental health issue. We think from the statistical evidence that we have, it's probably risen to about 1 in 4. So we know that was already a challenge, and it's increased. significantly. We also know that adults with mental health condition, for the majority of them, the issue started pre-14. So we know that trying to get early intervention and prevention in schools is absolutely key to supporting a reduction in adult mental health challenges. And as you'll all know, those sorts of statistics are exacerbated or the increased chance of you having a mental health challenge if you have a care experience background. So we know that this is where we need to target our support. This just a little bit back to front, but just I should have probably put this earlier in just to kind of tell you where we are and how kind of the sort of scale of our operation in Scotland. So we've got 55 partner schools, mainly through kind of central belts at Edinburgh, Glasgow, but we're down in South Ayrshire. We've got schools in Dundee and Perth and Kinross and Angus as well. We're also supporting schools in Stirling. We've just started supporting some schools in the Highlands, and we're doing this by a remote digital offer, which is quite exciting because it's actually been delivered by someone who's in Northern Ireland. But it's been fantastic that we've been able to reach out to our more remote communities and provide them with a service, and that's something that we learned to do through the pandemic. It's, you know, we're very much a relationship-based organisation. It's all about relationships, so it wouldn't be something that we would have naturally gravitated to previously, but our learning from the pandemic has allowed us to be more confident of our ability to do that. And whilst it doesn't replace face-to-face work with a vulnerable child, it does offer some support, and we're pleased that we've been able to offer it, and we're looking at kind of how we can offer a bit of more of a mixed model to some of those more remote communities. We also support teachers across the piece, not just the schools that we're in, and we've actually in the past year supported over 5,000 teachers all across Scotland from every single local authority. And again, I'll come on to some of that in a second in terms of kind of what that work has involved. So I just want to bring it back to the children and young people and just mention some of the issues that are coming up for them. And these are very recent data that we have. I really have to squint, and I tell you what, with my bifocals, it's a bit tough there. But hopefully you can see these are some of the issues that are coming up for children. These are things that have come up for them since August. So this is this kind of return to school, which has been different again to the previous return to school. Friendships remain one of the most challenging areas for children and young people. There's been a lot of kind of settling back into that. We know that we've got children and young people whose behaviour is perhaps less mature than it was, or what you might expect it to be in terms of age appropriateness, and that's across the piece. Secondary school children who are operating at lower level than we might have expected emotionally, and primary school children as well. And it's kind of probably to be expected given what people have been going through. You'll also see that family relationships are a really big part of that. Now we extract family relationship. We don't just kind of put it in a bucket. So the two big ones there are kind of parents and siblings, but we also have another category where it's a kind of wider family as well, and that's also an issue that comes up for children and young people. You can see that these emotional issues and these are ones that children and young people have identified themselves. You know, sadness, anger, you know, and worry. And again, these are arising in terms of kind of what we're experiencing. Just moving on to the next slide. These are issues that have been raised in primary school. Again, I'm sorry, you really have to peer at these, don't you? It's some of kind of what was coming up there again, but just in terms of other issues that are coming through, kind of loss and bereavement, emotional issues, bullying. Pets there at the end. Pets has been a really tricky one during the pandemic, because actually for some of our families, they're no longer able to afford the pet that they had. And that pet's often the emotional crutch for children and young people who are really struggling with their their feelings. In some cases, the pet's died, and that's quite an issue. And that's an issue for primary and secondary age children, especially those who are kind of have had challenges emotionally. So just moving quickly on to the next slide. I don't know how I'm expecting you to read the tiny print on here, but these are issues coming up in secondary school. Some of them are similar to kind of primary aged issues around kind of relationships within the family and with friendship groups. But as you will see, some of the other things that are coming in on this slide are around kind of self-harm, eating disorders, issues around sexuality, but also issues around sexual abuse as well. These are things that we also actually experience in primary, but we have a higher incidence of them in secondary. And I think it's probably about the disclosures that we get in secondary and the emergence of some of these issues through behaviour, which then gets picked up in the school and then gets then they get referred on to Place to Be for support with those issues. The next slide is hopefully you can read some of this, but these are some of the other issues that are raised, and I wanted to share this with you because actually, you know, these don't all thank you, I'm glad you can share the video because it's quite the PowerPoint, because some of it's quite small, but these are some of the other issues raised. Now, they don't necessarily like pop up to the top of the data list, but I think you can see the range of issues that children and young people are experiencing. Also, the way that we break it down does mean that, you know, there are a number of options where things could be could fit, and some of these maybe kind of would form bigger categories. As you can see there at the top of the second column, sort of care experience is one of the issues that does come up quite frequently for children and young people. They may come to us with another issue, but underlying that will be the kind of the trauma of their care experience. Okay, so since you'll have the slides, you get a chance to have a look at that in a wee bit more detail, but I can always bring it up later if that's something that you'd like to look at. I would probably just draw out a couple of things. Just post-pandemic, we have definitely seen an increase in self-harm and suicidal ideation in our secondary school pupils. We have also seen an increase in self-harm in primary, although main issues in primary that have increased are around kind of worry and anxiety and fear. We've also, with our work with staff, have seen an increase in suicidal ideation and self-harm amongst staff, which is very concerning. And I think it speaks to the challenges that teaching staff and support staff in schools have had over the past year and a half, 2 years, on top of what was already a difficult and challenging workload and expectations. On top of that, to have then become frontline workers and to deal with all of the challenge that they've dealt with there, on a personal level as well as a professional level. So we have got some very fragile adults supporting fragile children and young people. So that is a big concern to us. It does kind of bring me on to kind of us, you know, supporting the system around the child. So one of the big things that we've again, this is something we've always done, but has become much more important now, kind of post-pandemic, or well, not even post-pandemic, are we? We're just kind of mid-pandemic or whatever it is that we are at now, is around Place to Think. It's an opportunity for the staff member to just talk about what is happening for them. So it might be an individual child whose behaviour is challenging in their classroom, or it might be around group behaviour, it might be around the classroom in general, or it might be around a wider piece. It might be how their own sort of secondary trauma, their own experience of their own mental health. What we want to do is give them a safe space to speak with a clinician who can support and guide them through that. During the pandemic, we offered group Place to Think sessions for teachers across Scotland, so not just in our partner schools, so across Scotland. And at one point, I think we had a waiting list of about 300, but it was really fantastic to be able to offer staff that opportunity to come together and talk about kind of what the issues were arising with them, and use we did group Place to Think as part of that digital offer, and it was an opportunity then to also have a bit of peer learning, but guided by a trained clinician who could support and steer that conversation, always with a focus on the needs of the child at the centre of that. Just a few of the other things that we do at Place to Be, it's about that whole mentally healthy schools, and we have a range of interventions across the piece, from sort of our basic Mental Health Champions Foundation programme to supporting school leaders programme, which is about diagnostic for your whole school, and about implementing, so doing the diagnostic and then implementing a kind of mentally healthy schools approach, and you know, kind of everything in between. So next slide. So the other hugely important part of all of this is our parenting offer and kind of what we offer to families around a child. So this has recently changed in terms of kind of what we do, but we've got a sort of universal offer, which is around kind of parenting resources and parenting partnership, which is through our school-based staff who meet with parents and support them around the concerns that might be raised in relation to their child and kind of what their child is raising. So we'll work with the kind of the main carer for that child around what's happening for that child who might be having a targeted intervention. Although obviously that's kind of consent-based, based on the kind of the child's consent. What we have in terms of a targeted offer at the moment is this personalised individual parenting training, which was designed by NHS Maudsley Fostering and Adoption Unit. It's really, really trauma informed, and it's absolutely about the child-parent relationship or child-carer relationship, and it's one-to-one, so it's not the big group-based, shameful, embarrassing programs. It's about how do we work on the strengths of you and your child together, and it's shaped to that relationship. So it's an awful name, personalized individual parenting training. Awful. It needs to be changed. But what it is personalized and individual to that pairing, and we've seen some really positive results. And what's wonderful about that is it's designed for 3 to 8 year olds. Although it can support people, children rather, who are kind of older than that. But it really is early intervention and prevention, and it's a recognition that that behaviours that are emerge early. We can't wait until secondary school to support children and their carers in how they're managing their own mental health and how they're building their own resilience. We've got a few digital resources, so obviously we want these to be available when we are not available. So these are our partners in providing digital supports, which I'm 100 years old, so I'm not as confident with these, but I know that our young people and our children access these and find them really useful supports, as do our savvy parents. So these are options for digital support out with the service. I then want to come on to one thing which is kind of it's quite special, I think, for us, is that we work with Murray House Initial Teacher Education, and we are working with teachers at the university to educate them around the kind of mental health and well-being needs of the children in their classroom. So I'm sure many of you experienced this in the past, and I know Celsius will have been invited. So there's that kind of, oh, we're doing mental health next week. Could you come and do an hour for us? And Place to Be have said, well, no, we don't think an hour is enough. We think that in order for a child to manage their education, they need to have the well-being foundation, they need to have the resilience, they need to be able to cope with their emotions, this needs to be embedded at the very beginning. And we think it needs to be imbued throughout all your programs. So we now have a clinician embedded in the teacher education program at Murray House who provides, she lectures, she provides tutorials, she works with the staff team, and it's completely embedded in the education delivery piece. But she also delivers one-to-one for students who are struggling or who have particular issues or questions around their professional identity and the professional delivery. She does group-based work in terms of kind of place to think, particularly when they're on probation and they're in their classroom for the first time and they're really experiencing what this looks like, and working with them on the delivery of their work through that mental health lens. And it's a really fantastic piece of work and delight. We're in our second year now actually it's third year at Murray House. We're coming into and it looks like that they're going to invest in the programme going forward. So we're really delighted about that, because we think it's really, really important that actually everybody entering the teaching profession has that understanding of children's needs at the very start and the very heart of their profession. So I think it's a really special part of what we do, and I really want to be doing it in many, many more places. So just to sort of bring this back to kind of care experience children and young people, given that particularly that's your focus, but it's something we care about very deeply. terrible spelling error there on my slides. But we've got a rights-based approach to accessing mental health support. We absolutely think that children and young people should be able to access the support when and where they need it, which is why being in school is a really fantastic place to do that, because a child can access the service when and where they need it. We're working at the moment with the kind of virtual heads and virtual school network to look at kind of how we can provide those opportunities, particularly for our care experienced children and young people. And we're hoping that we'll be able to offer specific place to talk opportunities to children and young people so that they can access those themselves. I've mentioned there about the work that we've done with Maudsley Fostering and Adoption Unit around the parenting intervention. We're also, we've just refreshed our guidance, on adopted children and young people in our one-to-one counselling. Often it's been something that has caused a little bit of anxiety because we haven't felt that we're the right place to deal with adoption issues. So it's a kind of, is this issue about adoption, or is it about the presenting issue, worry or anxiety about exams, with an understanding that underneath that sits the trauma that has come as part of that adoption process. So we're just looking at kind of how we support our clinicians to be able to do work that needs to be done and to support those children and young people in our schools. And obviously working on staff learning around mental health needs of care experienced children and young people, and absolutely kind of a lens on that. And again, the other piece that we want to do and we're working on developing at the moment is our reflective supervision, and again the focus on care experienced children and young people there. And again, Place to Think offers an opportunity to kind of put the theory into practice through support through a clinician. So I think it's me getting to breakout questions. So I'm going to pause there. I'm going to stop screen sharing. You don't have to listen to me anymore. And an opportunity for Q&A. So thank you very much. I'm going to have to figure out how to stop sharing.
Jacqueline, thank you so much for that. That was a great presentation, and I put it in the chat, but I found that video really powerful. I thought the young people were so articulate and really able to talk about why the programme and the support was so helpful for them. So thank you very much for sharing that with us. Before we go into the breakout rooms, has anybody got any questions or reflections or anything like that they would like to ask Jacqueline? I can't see everybody, so please either put your hand up or give a shout if you do.
I'm going to shout if that's all right, if you can see me.
Yes, of course.
Hello, hi. So that was a fantastic presentation. Thank you so much. So my name's Debbie Zymer and I work for in tandem at Inspiring Scotland. So we offer mentoring to care experienced young people. And well, there's something I'd maybe probably like to take offline a little bit on how we can support more care experienced young people, because we are community based and not in schools. So many of our young people statistically actually don't go to school or have very patchy school attendance. Yeah. So so in tandem sort of fills the gap. So we're not MCR Pathways, which is in school, which I don't know how you work with them, but as you were going through the presentation, obviously I kept focusing to what I do and how we can help support more of our young people. And so I've probably got 2 points of a comment, maybe a question at some point. One is, how we can look to support more of our young people that do fall through the gaps, and many of that's in tandem. Yeah. That's our young people.
Yeah.
And I would like to pick up at a separate time with you. We are looking at the minute around evaluation and impact and outcomes and what we provide. So I was quite interested in hearing what you align to and your evaluation process. So I hope you don't mind, Jacqueline, if I could maybe pick that up at another time, because we partner with 12 partner charities across Scotland, delivering in 19 local authorities. So we're working with all of them. So I think the more consistent an approach and using best practice, the better then that evidence and support will be to support prevention. And that's my key bit at the minute, is to support the prevention and not the medicine, because I'm finding that we support young people 8 to 14-year-olds. We are now looking at running mentoring, what could be classed nearly more like befriending at a younger age. So I was interested to see what you were saying about that, because we're waiting for young people to be put on a CSO, and it's heartbreaking. Absolutely heartbreaking. So so we're looking at that as well. So super presentation, wonderful to make contact and with others that may be on the call, in how we can all work together to support our young people. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. That's really kind of you. Thank you. Just on the early years piece, I've been on the parenting side of this situation, and I think the more that we could do the earlier would be so much better, particularly at transition. And I mean transition from early years into primary. I think that there's so much more support that could be offered there for our care experienced children and young people, and much more support, I think, for the teaching staff to really understand how that might that transition might play out in their classroom. So I think that's really, really important. Just addressing just a couple of what you were sort of saying there, if I might. We absolutely acknowledge the need to be in the community, and we literally just employed a clinician who will be actually down in South Ayrshire, going out to kind of community groups and going to other places where young people might be, getting to know them, supporting them to understand kind of what we do, and then if they're interested or they need a targeted support, one-to-one interventional group work, that will then sort of take place in a community setting out with that group, but going out there and getting to know and meet the young people in their settings and the places they choose. We're also just about to start work in Rockwell in Dundee, which is for children and people who haven't managed in mainstream school. But our approach there is we're probably going to do less work with the children, partly because those young people will have had a million adults in their lives already. They'll have had multiple social workers, they'll have had multiple education psychologists and multiple teachers, loads and loads of adults trying to resolve whatever their experience has been. And we don't want to be just another adult who sort of drops in and drops back out again. We absolutely don't want to be that. So what we want to do is support the professionals who are around those young people and help them with their understanding of kind of what they can do and how they become that trusted adult and how they respond to that, and also how they deal with some of the secondary trauma that they'll be experiencing as a result of supporting those young people. But we want to be working with them in that capacity. We do have some evidence and some data about successes with supporting children and young people back into school. I've got, actually, it is another South Ayrshire example that's the top of my mind at the moment, but it was a young person who had not been to school in some considerable time, and our counsellor worked with them externally at first and then worked with them internally and supported them back into school. But we've also got young people who will only come to school for their session with their place to be professional. So and I'm sure that that's similar to kind of your own experience. So yeah, really helpful comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jacqueline. And I know that there's, I think, quite a few people on the call that are eager to connect with you as well. So we can maybe make sure that we share the contact details as well after this, so that people can get in touch with you individually about those.
Please do.
That's all right. We unfortunately have to move into breakout rooms now, so we've got a chance to discuss this in a bit more detail. But Barbara and Veronica, I know that you guys have put questions in the chat. So what I'd maybe suggest is that initially, Jacqueline, if you could let people know in the chat the answers to those questions. But I'm just thinking, Barbara, you're asking about questions through other third sector organisations, and Veronica, you're asking about whether Place to Be can work with individual schools or if it needs to be commissioned through local authorities. I think they are questions that will be of interest to quite a wide range of people. So what we'll maybe do as well is put them as a sort of Q&A on the website as well, just so that other people watching this would be able to see, because there were things that struck me as well. I think a lot of people would be really interested in working alongside Place to Be. So if that's okay with folks, we can do that as well. Does that sound all right? Brilliant, thank you. So we're going to move into our breakout rooms now, and I think we've got a slide with the questions, either Michelle or Jacqueline, that we're going to be discussing. Oh, Jacqueline, sorry, you're on mute, I can't hear you.
Do you want me to pull us up, the questions?
Oh yeah, that would be great, thank you.
No problem. So, am I sharing again? Hopefully. Okay, oh, if you're right back to the beginning, maybe I'll do it all again. I'm sure you'd all love that. Let me just whiz through this. I've got to navigate through. Okay, so that's the questions. If you can see them all there. So do we need targeted mental health support for care experienced children and young people? What role should schools play, and what do they need to fulfill that role? What are the gaps in current early intervention and prevention services for children and young people? And what's your vision for mental health supports for care experienced pupils?
Thank you, Jacqueline. So, like I said, we're going to go into breakout rooms. We're going to have 3 rooms, and they're going to be facilitated by a member of Celsius staff. So, there'll be myself, Emma Hanley, and Michael Bettencourt in your groups. We do have Jamboards if you would like to use them, but otherwise, like I said, please feel free to put your camera on, mute your mic, and just get involved in the discussions. Just some small questions there for us to think about, but I think they'll really generate lots of rich discussion. So we'll come back here about 11:15 and do just a couple of bits of feedback from each group. But if there's any more questions that come to you, please keep a hold of them and put them in the chat when we get back, because we'll be able to pass them on to Jacqueline as well, even if we don't have time to answer them today. Well, like I was saying, that there was some great discussion in our group. We could honestly have stayed there for a very long time discussing those questions, but alas, we can't, because we need to finish at 11. So I think I will go to my colleagues and ask for some feedback from their breakout rooms. What we'll also do is we will collate all of these and make them available as notes. We'll anonymise them as well, so people don't need to worry about that, but we'll collate all the feedback from the breakout rooms and make it available on the website underneath the video recording as well, because we know that we're never able to reflect all the richness of the discussion in a few minutes. So Emma, can I come to you and ask what the feedback was from your group, please?
You certainly can. I'm just going to hand over to Fiona, who's going to feedback on our behalf.
Thank you.
As I say, jump in if I forget anything. I don't think I heard a single disagreement to the first question. Do we need targeted mental health support for care experienced young people? There was not a single disagreement, and I think we all agree that the evidence and the research categorically supports the need for that going forward. I don't know if anybody else wants to come in on the first question. Oh, okay. So the second question, what role should schools play and what would they need? I think, again, no disagreement on schools fulfilling a huge role, a hugely important role. From the earliest possible times onwards, I loved the fact reminded that the majority of adults with mental health issues, this started for them before they were 14. And I love the comments that earlier that we can get into helping youngsters with their mental and emotional well-being, the better, and then respond as they go through all their different developmental stages and revisit these things as they go. And school is definitely the hub that everybody that needs to be involved in that could be working around. But it was also made a very important point made that youngsters need a kind of flexibility of response. Some youngsters will never feel comfortable in school. Some parents will never feel comfortable that it won't bring more trouble into their household if they involve schools too much. So a flexibility maybe through somebody suggested work through the outdoors, art clubs, all the things that youngsters like to do that would be a safe place with safe, trusted adults to develop these relationships and develop their confidence to be able to talk about what they need. Also, we raised lots of examples about the pandemic helping us be creative and flexible about how we're contacting people. So some families will be happy about using the internet and using video. And we were talking there just at the end about me talking to a youngster's cat, pet cat, while they were sitting talking to me just a couple of weeks ago, and was talking to their teddy. Which when that might be a possibility in school, but it's certainly when you're talking to them in their own rooms and their own houses by video, it certainly opened my eyes to the possibilities. Also, the last bit about the 24-hour, 7 days a week, 365 days a week nature of the need for children and families. And again, the pandemic may be opening up a way of being able to give people some quicker response to a youngster's mental and emotional wellbeing needs than having to sit and wait for a referral to whoever it is endlessly, where things get worse and worse. I think there's some learning there. I'll shut up for a minute.
Fiona, thank you so much. That was really comprehensive feedback. It sounds like really rich discussions in your group. Is there anything else that that was in the group with Fiona and Emma want to add to that? No. Thank you again, Fiona, for feeding back. Much appreciated. Michael, I will come on to the group that you were facilitating.
Thank you. The group volunteered me to feedback. I think it's important to start off by just acknowledging complexity. We talked about complexity. We talked about the complexity of mental health, the complexity of mental health for care experienced young people, that they are a cohort who have lots of different issues, and the complexity for teachers at the moment working in a pandemic. So we talked a lot about that and the need for different interventions for different aspects of that complexity. We wanted to stress the importance of supporting the workforce because of all of that, that they are working in that, and we didn't want this to become a stick to beat them with. So yes, they need training, but we want to do that sensitively, and we want to acknowledge the progress that has already been made. So the importance of this being holistically incorporated, that was stressed at the beginning in the presentation, not an add-on, not an additional stressor for the school system. I think I'm going to stop there. I can't do justice to the conversation, and I'm only picking out headlines, but hopefully I've picked out the headlines from the group. Does anybody want to add anything? Okay, I'll stop there.
Thank you, Michael. And our group, I think a lot of the conversation in the group that I was in did mirror and chime with a lot of what's already been discussed. I think there was a wholehearted agreement that yes, we do need targeted support for children and young people with care experience, but that led us down the route of thinking about, well, what does that look like and what does that mean, and coming to the conclusion, as you know, we do with many other things, that we need to ask children and young people about how they want that support to be delivered to them, what they want it to look like, that we can't just make assumptions about that this is what traditionally mental health and wellbeing supporters look like, therefore this is what will be offered. We need to think about the person, we need to think about the setting, we need to think about the method of engagement. And some young people work really, really well face to face, others prefer online. We also talked about art, music therapy, the wide range of different supports that are available, but just the real needs to make sure that we are fitting the supports to children and young people rather than trying to fit children and young people into the supports that are currently available to us. And we also then went on to talking about where the gaps are, or where we would like to see more investment or support. And transitions really, really dominated that discussion, but I think not transitions we did talk about the fact that transitions can quite traditionally be seen as primary to secondary school, or secondary school to post 16, because someone asked a question about support for early years into primary, and people were aware of bits and pieces going on, but not anything systemic or particular in that area, which led us on to talking about just the huge amount of transitions that people face every single day, and that these maybe aren't recognised more widely, and if understanding and support was put into place, and understanding the impact that all the small transitions, or what can be perceived by others as small transitions, can have, particularly for care experienced children and young people, and that might be of real benefit to providing the right support as well. Again, I don't think I will have done justice to the richness of the discussion in my group, so I will ask if there's anything that anybody wants to quickly add from my group before we finish up. Really see some faces, see some shakes. No? Thank you very much, everyone. And just finally, before we wrap up, I honestly can't believe it's 5 to 11. I say this at every single forum meeting, but I genuinely don't know where the time goes. But is there anything that anybody wants to add just before we finish up? No? Like I say, I'm sure we could have stayed in the breakout rooms and stayed discussing this subject for a really, really long time. So all that's really left for me to do is say a huge thank you to Jacqueline and Place to Be for coming along this morning, just for the rich discussion, for the materials, and giving us the chance to dig into this a wee bit. Because it's, like I said at the start, it's a topic that has been on the agenda for a long time and will rightly stay there. So it's been really nice to have the opportunity to think together about it. Jacqueline, I know that you've very kindly put your contact details in the chat. So if anybody would like to get in touch with Jacqueline to discuss this area in more depth, or the services that are available, please do so. I was also asked by Anne at Children's Health Scotland to let people know that the Scottish Government have got a professional learning resource on promoting positive mental health in schools, which is a partnership between the Mental Health Foundation, Children's Health Scotland and Digital Bricks. So that I will put the link for that in the chat just as we finish up, but we'll also put that out in the newsletter that will follow up with this as well, in case people want to have a look at that or pass that on. Our next forum will be in the new year, in 2022, which is scary. Probably around March time is when we have our first forum. If anybody has got any ideas or areas or themes that they would like to see us focus on, please feel free to email in, and we will always do our very best to meet those asks from people. And like we said earlier, we will make all the information and materials available on our website as soon as we can after today's session. We will also be sending out an evaluation straight after this session on how you found today, and we'd be really, really grateful if you could it shouldn't take any more than 5 minutes, so we'd be really grateful if you would complete that, because it does help us to shape future events for themes and formats and all those kind of things. I'd like to say a huge thank you to our behind the scenes Celsius team who keep us going, and particularly with all the technical things. So a big thanks to everybody there, and to Emma and Michael for your facilitation. Jacqueline, again, a massive thanks to you and the young people and contributors to your video for coming along and sharing the work. And lastly, but certainly not least, a big thank you to all of you for coming along today, and as usual, participating and engaging with such motivation and passion and enthusiasm. It's been another great session, and we really appreciate you taking the time out of what we know is really busy diaries. So thank you very, very much, and we hope to see you in the new year.